We are halfway through week 5. Uh, this is our second week of thinking about gods and beliefs and religion and how those things intersect with the study of philosophy. As we've seen, philosophers have a lot of things to say about gods and religions and beliefs and actions. Uh, so, what we're doing is trying to get a sense of what are all those different positions one might take philosophically around the issues of religion and faith and gods. This week we're going to talk about rationalism and determinism and integrity, looking at Lara Buchak and Louise Antony. We're going to be thinking about, what do those things mean as far as in terms of our own areas of faith, but also in terms of the study of philosophy and how we go about talking about these issues in philosophy. In the meantime, you're working on your projects, you're doing your journal entries, you're thinking, you're reading your skills book, you're thinking about all kinds of different issues. We're 1/3 of the way through the course. So I hope that you're getting something out of this. I hope this is meaningful for you. I hope you're learning not just about philosophy, but about yourself as a student and yourself as a writer and as a thinker. So let's go ahead and jump into this lecture. You'll see on your screen here a picture of me and my son. This actually was just taken last night at my son's JV football game. I was talking with my wife this afternoon, or yesterday afternoon, about our son and how much he is like me, how he likes similar kinds of foods. He likes similar kinds of processes to his day. He has similar ways of thinking. I wanted to represent for you this kind of idea of how we become who we become by starting with talking about my son. Uh, we have similar body types. We look pretty similar in face, although mine's pretty gray and his is pretty young and sprightly. My son's only 15 years old. We share some real characteristics. We both have kind of an intellectual way of thinking and speaking. We're both pretty moral. We care about issues of justice. We're both pretty critical of ourselves. We both work pretty hard. We're both sarcastic. And, our body types are similar. We're both kind of hefty people, although he's in much better shape than I am right now. On the left side, you'll see some of my characteristics that I don't think he fully shares. I'm poetic. I don't like my body. I hate my body. I was an anxious student, and that resulted in me not being always a great student. I'm a pretty patient person, but I'm also stern. There's kind of like really set guidelines for what I believe is appropriate. My son is musical, but he's musical in a way that is very regimented and mathematical. He's a drummer. He's body conscious. He cares very much about what his bodies can do. That's partly because he's 15, and he's just discovering his body's doing pretty cool things. He's a great student. My son is really focused on school and doing well, and he's got a bit of a short temper. That's probably also because he's 15. I share this with you not just because I want to talk about my son, who's pretty awesome, but because I want to talk about determinism and free will. This is a really classic kind of topic in thinking in philosophical terms. Are we as people, do we as people have a determined fate, a determined future? Aren't we something because we were made to be something? Or do we have free will? Can we make choices that are of our own free will? So we flip back to my son. Does he have a choice on whether or not he's going to be intellectual and moral and critical and hard worker and sarcastic? and hefty, or is his future determined for him because of his genetics? And we might ask, do we have a choice on what kind of personality we have, or what kind of future we have, or what kind of career we end up doing, or is that determined for us by a God or an outside force? Do we have free will? Can we change what we are? Can we explore new ideas? Can we become something different than what we think we are? This also, starts to get into a pretty complicated issue of timelines. Is there a set future? Is there a set past? Can we go and change these things? It's pretty complicated and confusing. These issues are particularly important when it comes to the issue of religion. If there is a God that we will believe in, does the God determine our fate for us, or does the God give us free will? And this gets into questions of like omnipotence and um, a God who knows everything. Um, if a God knows everything, a God knows what is going to happen in the future, isn't that kind of a determined fate? Or if the God doesn't know everything, are they really a God? If the God creates everything, didn't they create time as well? Or if they don't, are they really a God? If we have free will, is there a God? These are pretty interesting questions when it comes, questions that you sit around and with a drink with your friends and you debate. They're kind of fun questions for those purposes, but they really are fundamental questions as far as what we will believe in terms of religion and gods, how we will argue as philosophers on the basis of logic and evidence on what we believe. We had 2 readings for this week. Neither are particularly easy. Antony is a little bit easier than Buchak, uh, but I think both are really valuable for us in thinking about these issues of free will and determinism, but more particularly, what is the meaning of a God and what is the meaning of a faith? For Antony, Louise Antony, with her reasonable belief idea, she believes that the very nature of suffering and evil as suffering in the world, determines that we can't really fully believe in an idea of God. It's not that there is no God, it's just that for her, there is not enough reasonable evidence. There's, in fact, reasonable counter evidence to say that there is no God, because a just God would never allow the amount of suffering that happens in this world. And she deals with the questions of, well, what if there's a reason that he or she has this amount of suffering? What if there's a logical purpose behind the suffering? She deals with those questions and ultimately comes to the conclusion that there is no reasonable evidence to prove the existence of God. And in fact, there is counter evidence, to such a great amount of counter evidence that we can't overcome that to get to the point of belief. Buchak goes a different direction, and she believes that faith can be rational. That we make a decision about faith and we act rationally and we act consistently on the basis of that faith. And if that's the case, then it is rational. As long as it's the faith is consistent and the faith is not going against any real obvious counter evidence. As long as we are willing to risk something for that faith, then the faith is rational. It doesn't necessarily mean it's true. Neither Antony nor Buchak are talking in terms of truth. What they are talking about is what is reasonable to believe, what is rational to act on. And their arguments are pretty fascinating. there are also arguments that are, because they are arguments, they're arguments that we can argue with. We could argue with Antony, or we could argue with Buchak through the act of reading these arguments and considering them fully. Now, again, these readings are hard this week, but they're valuable. They're valuable in getting us to terms of what philosophers do. They're also valuable as far as thinking in terms of setting out on paths of living our lives. If we come to a conclusion that there is no good reason to believe in a God or gods, or on the other side of that, there are many good reasons not to believe in God or gods. If we come to that, then what does that mean about for our sense that our future is predetermined? Does that mean we are just lost in the woods? We've got to find our way? Or if we choose to believe that faith is rational, that we set ourselves out on a path, and that path is irrational, and we will stick to it even if there are risks, even if we find some evidence that might make us question that, does that mean that we can't go exploring in the woods? We can't find new paths, new possibilities? The questions of faith and gods cause us to really think about what it is we do in the world, how we act in the world as we deal with those questions. I'm going to switch tracks here for just a second and talk about some classroom issues, and then we'll come back to this because I want to tie these classroom issues into our discussion here. So I want to show you an example of a journal, and I'll post this in a document form on our page. But here, I decided to do the journals this week. I watched the religion versus philosophy video, the very quick video that talks about logic versus belief. And I took my new knowledge notes and I took my resistance notes. I then read through Louise Antony, and I took my new knowledge notes and my resistance notes. And you'll see, I did this fairly honestly. I mean, I've read Louise Antony many, many times. I've watched that video a number of times because I've been teaching both for a while. But I wanted to give a genuine effort here to show you how I might do these notes. New knowledge, things that I've been thinking about, things that were new to me, or things that I want to really explore more. So I record it in new knowledge. Resistant notes, things that I had problems with, or things I wanted to argue with, or problems I had with the actual reading. I did it with Lara Buchak. It was a longer passage, so I had to take more notes, new knowledge notes and resistance notes. Notice I believe too that the essay is long and the essay is confusing, and I struggle every semester on whether or not I should assign this essay. Ultimately, I think it's a really good counterbalance to Louise Antony, but it is a very difficult essay to read. And then my philosophy journals for this lecture. I pretended like I went ahead and watched the lecture, and I took down the different things that I've talked about in the lecture and what was important in the lecture. I took down the resistance notes that the professor is too good looking and it's so distracting, although I'm not actually appearing on camera this time. So there's my lecture notes there as well, something that you must include in your reading journals. You must include the lecture notes. And then I've got my reflection. I'll just read the reflection here for you quickly. This week focused on some fundamental issues I've been having with philosophy. How do we know what is true? What makes something true? Is truth predetermined, something we find outside the cave, or is truth something we make and discover through thinking, like Descartes. Antony's demands that there be reasons for belief, and Buchak's explanation about rational thought and the ways faith is I don't know what I wrote there. That faith is accepted from direct evidence. That's not the word I meant. Maybe the faith uh, isn't effected by direct evidence. The video's discussion of the differences between faith and logic, and Mike's lecture about free will and determinism, how this relates to our own integrity, all helped me start to see that philosophy is meaningful, or can be meaningful. Up until now, I thought most of this was bullshit and pages to read, but if philosophy can help us understand fundamental questions of existence and belief, and also help us apply those questions to our actions in the world, well, I can sort of see the value of all this reading. That would be my journal entry. I want you to think about the journal entries you're doing. How effectively are you doing them? How fully are you doing them? Go back and look at your first grade on them. You'll be getting a second grade here in a week or so on your journals again. I'm going to expect to see that there's some consistency in your journals based on the grade that you want to get on those. What I'm presenting here to you right now is enough for the a full credit on journals. It shows me that the person who wrote these has done the reading. It shows me that they're actually engaged and thinking about it, which is what I want to see out of your journals. If your journals are not showing me that you've actually done the reading, if your journals are not showing me that you are actually engaged in thinking about the reading, then you're not going to get full credit. Let's talk a moment about the project. You're engaged in this project right now. You are thinking about a text, one of the texts that um, you've the text that you've selected from the list. You are thinking about your potential audience for that text. You're thinking about the type of text, about the philosophy for that text. You're doing reading and analysis, interpretation and creation. This is a big project with lots of different moving parts for your thinking. It's not actually all that hard once you make your decisions, but your thinking requires you to do some work here. And I'll just let you know, I was so disappointed in our discussion board last week. So few people thinking about their project, just kind of copying the person who wrote before them. There was not a lot of integrity happening in that discussion board because people were just copying the same old thing that other people had said without even knowing what it meant. A lot of people said they were going to do expository writing, but I imagine if we did a quiz right now in this class, most people would not know what expository writing is. You need to really think through this project, figure out what you want to write and how you want to write it. There's a reason why this is important. It's not just because I'm asking you to do it. It's not just because you want to get an A. In fact, I don't really care about A's or grades. There's a reason this is important, and that is because of the fundamental belief that I have. It is almost an unquestioned belief. It is a matter of faith for me that education matters. That students who are involved in their courses are experiencing something important. I act with integrity when I teach. This is meaningful to me because I have a belief in what I do, and I've done a lot of thinking about it. I've logicked my way through it, and I put it into action. In having a belief and a logic and an action, as we can see from Buchak and from Antony, a belief, a logic, and action builds a sense of integrity in who you are as a person. Whether your fate is predetermined or whether your fate is free will, if you have integrity in what you do, you have meaning. And I'm speaking about integrity, as I've spoken about it before, because the discussion board we had last week, not a lot of integrity. Some of your journals, not a lot of integrity. In fact, some of the journals and some of the discussion boards show a real lack of integrity. There's some cheating going on in these. And actually, if you just copied what somebody said about expository writing last week, you were coming pretty close to cheating. Integrity matters, not because I'm demanding that you're honest and that you're doing your work. Integrity matters because it is the way that we put our belief. It's the way we apply logic, the way we think about things, and it's the way we do things in this world. Integrity requires you to do all three of those things. So you may believe that you are a person of integrity, that you have a set God that you believe in, that you have logicked your way through this, and that you have made your decisions, and that you are putting that into action. But if that integrity doesn't carry you through to coursework, where you are actively engaged in a meaningful way because you believe in things, you may have a problem. I'm not going to suggest that your God will strike you down, but I will suggest that a person of integrity can believe something in this space and act in a similar way over another space. Ultimately, I think you have to ask yourself, for your work that you're doing in this course and in all your courses, for the work you want to do in your career, for the person that you see yourself as, for the child of a parent who you may be very similar to, or for a student who wants to learn and become something, or as a person of faith, you have to ask yourself, is what I believe provable? That's what Louise Antony asks us. And it's what Lara Buchak asks us too, although her answer is a little bit different. Is what you believe provable? Can you prove that your beliefs about education, your beliefs about being a child, your beliefs about being a person of faith, are they provable? One way to think about whether or not those beliefs are actually something you believe in is, are your actions cohesive and rational? Do they follow this pattern of belief? Are you consistent in what you say you believe and what you actually end up doing? The last question you would have to ask yourself is, what evidence have you of your integrity? Can you prove to yourself, can you prove to others that you are a person of integrity through the things that you do? The point of all this is not that I'm trying to be your self-help guru, but that philosophy has real meaning in this world. It can make us rethink what we think we believe and how we think we should act and how we think we should think. It forces us to confront meanings in our lives and then think about how we interact with those meanings. The reading that you do weekly in this course, the thinking, the discussion boards you do, the writing that you're doing, all of that has meaning. And if you are not letting it have meaning because you're too busy doing your life, which is a perfectly valid thing to do, by the way, I'm not criticizing that, but if you're not letting this course have meaning, then you're not acting with integrity. I've failed a couple people this semester already because of AI writing. And if there's no better example of academic work that lacks integrity, a person who goes to AI and puts their prompts in and asks AI to write their journal for them, that's somebody that has no real integrity. I would have to question what their beliefs are, whether or not they've actually got any proof about their beliefs due to their actions. I hope you're enjoying the class, and I hope that you are getting something meaningful out of this because you are approaching it with integrity, and most of you are. There's no question. But even for those who approach it with integrity, it's worth giving yourself a pat on the back and saying, yes, what I believe is provable. My actions are cohesive and rational, and I have evidence that I have integrity. as always, if you have questions about the journals, about the discussion boards, about the readings, about the project, contact me. I talked to a couple people during office hours this week, and I thought we got some really good work done together on their project. I'm always happy to talk to you. Send me an email, and we'll set up a meeting. I hope you have a great week, and we'll talk to you next week.